Only sports show that keeps you glued to your seat. Everything else is just talk. Now, here's your host, Richard Miller.
Oh, it's another wonderful day to be alive in the city of Jacksonville, Florida. Welcome on in right here. It is Miller on Sports on 1600 The Beach. You can always listen online at 1600thebeach.com. We bring in Larry Pasquale, former NFL special teams coach, 22 years in the NFL. Lions, Jets, Chargers, Eagles, Jags, Rams, you name it, he's probably coached there. He's a friend of the program and always a lot of fun. How you doing, Coach Larry?
Very good. Thanks for having me on, Rich. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Now, I know most of the time when we talk, you're either coming back from vacation or planning a trip. Give me the details. What's going on with your trip schedule right now?
Well, right now I am in between trips. Right now I am home and enjoying being home. You know, we live here by the ocean. We live in Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra, and it's a great place to live. So I think I'm going to spend a little time here. It's a lot of fun. Oh,
it definitely is, and the weather ain't too bad for sure. Now, what's the trip coming up? Do you have one planned?
Well, there's a trip to Williamsburg, Virginia, because I'm a little bit of a history kind of guy, and I like to do those kinds of trips, and so we'll do that, and we'll do National Harbor. I don't know if you are familiar with National Harbor. Right there on the Potomac River, right near Washington, is a brand new city. With all the years that we drove up 95, you would look to the left and you'd see the Capitol on the Potomac, and if you look to the right, you would see just trees and forest, and now there's a whole city there called National Harbor.
Okay, very interesting.
Destination, and it's a wonderful spot, so we might do that.
That sounds good. It is AM 1600 on your radio dial. You can always listen online. Check it out, 1600thebeach.com. Coach, I don't know if I've asked you this recently, but how much do you miss being away from the game?
I miss parts. I miss parts of it. I miss the relationship with the people. I miss the games and the excitement of the games and making the adjustments. But the 17 and 18-hour days, I don't miss those. Not at all.
Not one bit. I think that sounds about right. Now, we were talking about this the other day off air. We saw yesterday Jags kicker Josh Scobee signing a 4-year contract extension instead of that franchise tag. Should Josh Scobee be paid like a top 3 kicker?
I think so. I think it's particularly important for the Jaguars right now because, you know, they're starting with new coaches. They have relatively new quarterbacks. This is a new team. No one can really predict where this team is going this year because it's relatively a new team. So I think that to have the kicker in place who did so well in the past, I think is a pretty important thing. Is every player in the league getting maybe a little bit more than most people would like him to get? Maybe. But the business is generating a lot of money.
It is.
The NFL franchises are worth a lot of money, so the players get paid a lot of money.
You've watched football for a long time. You've been around the game. You're a former special teams coach in the NFL. What do you think Josh Scobee's best attribute is?
Consistency, by far. And that's really the thing you have to have from a kicker. I mean, he also kicks off, but I think it's his consistency. When he steps on the field, you have a very good feeling. Your team is very confident that he will give it a great effort and he'll make most of his kicks. And I don't think bad weather and things like that, I don't think a lot of things affect him. I think he's pretty much right on. So if you can get consistency from any player on your team, any player, and the kicker included, then I think you've got yourself a winner.
Who was the most consistent kicker that you coached?
Well, you know, believe it, Mike Hollis, when he was with us, he made, I think, 83% of his kicks. And 66% of the games we won in those 5 years, Mike had one or more kicks that was a margin of victory. So I think I'd have to say he's one of them for sure. Pat Leahy kicked 18 years in the National Football League, and I had Pat 10 years with the Jets. And another person that maybe is a little under the radar is Jeff Wilkins from the St. Louis Rams. Jeff was really tough, and very steady. So I'll put them in that category. I was fortunate. I had some really good ones. I had John Carney, too.
Wow.
And I had Ruzick with the Eagles, and he's not as well known. I had Eddie Murray, who kicked a lot of years. So I think I was kind of fortunate. I had kickers that were really steady under the gun. I really appreciated that.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Larry Pasquale, joining us right here on Miller on Sports, former NFL special teams coach, named the special teams coach of the year back in 1990 while he was with the San Diego Chargers. Now, I don't know if we've talked about this either. Do you think Sebastian Janikowski of the Oakland Raiders, is he far and away the best kicker in the game?
Yeah, he is. When I scouted him at Florida State, I was with the Rams at the time. And that was my report. I said he would be a number one draft choice, and I said that's probably the best kicker that I've ever seen. Just raw power and talent. I thought he had it all. He's a pretty good. Plus, he was very physical. He was about 255 pounds when he was at Florida State. I don't know what he is, if he still is. But I saw him make some tackles on guys that got rocked. So I think when you see a kicker do things like that, he can kick off, he can kick field goals, he can punt the ball, and he can tackle. So I don't know what else a kicker is supposed to do.
I don't either. I really don't. Talking with Larry Pasquale right here on Miller on Sports. I know, Larry, the Jags signed John Bonamego to a deal back in January to be their new special teams coordinator. I saw that he broke into the league back with Jacksonville. I guess it was 2002 or so. Do you know John Bonamego?
Yeah, John was my assistant.
Okay.
His first year, he coached at West Point, and then we hired him from West Point, and he came down, and that was his first year in the National Football League. And I like John a lot. I think he's a good person, and I think he's a good coach, and I wish him only the best.
What do you think you taught him? What really stuck in his head, do you think?
Well, the thing about it is, and it came from Coughlin, it came from all of us, is the steadiness and the consistency of your work every day, and the details of what you're doing. And it got to the point where we would ask John to do the Saturday practice. A lot of people think Saturday practice is kind of a walkthrough and things. There's a lot of details in a Saturday practice. And we got the confidence in John that we could let him organize the Saturday practice, and I thought that was a real compliment to him, and he went on to do other things in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm. Do you all still keep in touch?
I haven't talked to John since he's back here in Jacksonville. I don't know. Maybe I said something wrong to him. I'm sure he'll call me one day, but I haven't talked to him. I'll see him at practice, at training camp or something.
Well, one of the things, Coach, food brings people together, and I'm sure all you have to do is invite them over to dinner, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and my wife is a good cook, so that would be an enticing invitation.
Absolutely. Larry Pasquale joining us, former NFL special teams coach, talking special teams, Josh Scobee, Mike Hollis, and much, much more on this Tuesday afternoon. You can always listen online. Check us out at 1600thebeach.com. What do you think of the Jags special teams unit? They let go of Kasim Osgood and a few other pieces. They still have Montel Owens, Josh Scobee. They drafted the punter very high. Fans weren't too excited about that. Do you think the moves so far are progressing towards positive things for the Jags on special teams?
Well, it's obvious that Coach Malarkey is trying to solidify special teams. He's trying to get the punter and the kicker. And believe me, there's three things. You have to have the snapper, you have to have the punter, and you have to have the kicker. And if you have quality in those positions, the snapper, the kicker, and the punter, then you have an opportunity to be very solid on special teams. And special teams is not only scoring, but it's field position. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. The other people are, you believe it or not, are your holder and your returners. And you have to have a sure-handed returner, and you have to have an outstanding holder. And that's what you hope your punter that you pick up is a really high-quality punter. So I think that they're solidifying their special teams, and then everything else is going to be a work in progress. The offense has got to come together, the defense has got to come together. And I think the Jaguars are going to surprise some people because I don't know if people realize how good they could be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. What's your win projection for them?
I'm hoping they're going to win 8, 9 games, and then they may surprise you. Maybe they're going to win 10 or 11, and that's going to put them up in a little better category. So I'm hoping that they win 8 or 9 games this year, because they're going to be out to win them all.
Yeah, I would like 8 or 9 games as well. Coach Larry Pasquale joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. We'll take a quick break, come back, talk more Jags, special teams, and much, much more. He is Coach Larry Pasquale. We talk about a man that spent a lot of time around football, 22 years in the NFL, 39 years overall, Special Teams Coach of the Year back in 1990. Not only that, he's a broadcaster, 8 years with MSG Radio and the Yes Network. He'll come back. He'll join us. We'll close it out, wrap up Miller on Sports on this Tuesday afternoon. Talk more Jags, more football. We're getting close, 50 days away from the first game, regular season. I'm excited. I'm sure you are as well. More of Coach Larry when we come back. Back in Coach Larry Pasquale. Also joining us, former NFL special teams coach. Coach Larry, thank you again. I know you're always hanging out, relaxing, but I appreciate you making some time for us.
No, I always enjoy it, Rich, and any time for you. One thing I think we'd be remiss is, especially when we started this franchise, is the fans. The fans, I thought, many times just willed us to a victory. I mean, they were relentless in cheering for their team and yelling when the other team was on the field. And, they were intelligent fans, the Jaguar fans, but they're passionate as well. And we can never forget, the contribution that those fans made, especially in those first 5 years. So I hope that we continue. We want to fill the stadium. We want those fans to participate and bring all the energy you have, because, believe me, teams need it, and they do feed off of it.
Coach, I don't know if you saw about a week or so ago where there was a discussion of tarp issues. Vito Stellino wrote about it. Shad Khan has brought it up. What's your take on the tarps at Everbank Field?
I read a little bit about it, and I don't know if I have a feeling about it one way or the other. I don't think I have a real intelligent answer to all of that. It's just I don't have a good feeling about it. I'd hate to answer it, really.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on that. Coach Larry Pasquale joining us right here on 1600 The Beach, AM 1600 on your radio dial. I don't know if you've seen this, but on Jaguars.com this week, they're compiling the 25 best Jaguars in franchise history. I've seen most of the top fives include Tony Boselli, Fred Taylor, Jimmy Smith. We had Richard Collier on yesterday. His top five is Boselli, Freddie T, Jimmy Smith, Mark Brunell, and Maurice Jones-Drew. If you could you give me your top 5 all-time Jags?
Well, the thing about it, I'm going to put McCardell and Leon Searcy in there as well. When the Jaguars had Leon Searcy at the right tackle and Tony Boselli at the left tackle, those were as good a tackles as they were in the National Football League. When you had Keenan McCardell and Jimmy Smith on either side, you created a lot of pressure on that team. So I think the other guy that I think will be unsung and is on offense is Wydell. I think Dave Wydell, if you've ever stood next to Dave Wydell, he is a very large person, and he was a center. He had experience. He made calls. Even though that was a terrific offensive line, I still like Dave Wydell. He's still local here. And the other man is Jeff Lagerman and Clyde Simmons. They brought a lot of leadership in that locker room. And, a lot of teams in the National Football League really undervalue the leadership qualities that a Lagerman and Clyde Simmons and those guys brought to that locker room. I think they had a lot to do with our success. I'll put them up there in the top 10 anyway.
Very interesting. Dave Wydell, Jeff Lagerman, Clyde Simmons, Leon Searcy, Tony Boselli. Those are a lot of great players. Would you say Tony Boselli, though, is number 1 in Jags franchise history?
Yeah, and I would say not only is he number 1 in Jags history, but on my book, and I've coached in 6 teams in 22 years, he's the best football player I've ever seen at any position. And the reason I say this is because I never saw a football player that could beat Tony Boselli. I saw people that could cover Jimmy Smith and I saw people that could tackle Freddie Taylor. And by the way, Freddie probably got to be up in there somewhere, but I never saw anybody that could get past Tony Boselli or shed his run block. When he wanted you blocked on a run, you were blocked.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched him for 5 years from a rookie from day one. Tony Boselli is the best football player I've ever been around.
Wow.
And I think that's saying something, because I was around. Here's a guy, Marshall Faulk.
Mm-hmm.
I was with Marshall Faulk up in St. Louis, and I put Tony Boselli above Marshall Faulk because I just think that Marshall could be tackled, and I never saw anybody defeat Tony Boselli.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Coach Larry, I do want to bring this up, a conversation with Larry Pasquale right here on Miller on Sports. We talked about it, I guess it was late last week, about the Jaguars' practice facilities. It looks like they're going to add a practice bubble maybe in the next year or two. And you were telling a very cool story about your time with the Rams and their practice facilities.
Which story was that?
You were talking about Mike Martz and how with the greatest show on turf that he had to always practice indoors.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, he never liked to go outside. The last 5 or 6 games of the year, we never practiced outside, because he wanted the timing of that offense to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a little bit of a handicap at times when you go out and you play in the rain and you play in the real cold weather at the latter part of the season. But that's just the way he was. He wanted nothing to stop the timing of his routes. And, if you ever watched Mike Martz, he would call a play and then he would turn his back and he would walk down the sideline and never even watch the play.
Why is that?
He just thought that anything he called was going to work.
Wow.
And if it didn't work, Marshall Faulk would come off the field and tell him why. So, there was some idiosyncrasies of that coach that are definitely very rare in the National Football League.
Did you have any superstitions when you coached?
I didn't in the beginning, but I started to develop them.
Really? What was the oddest one?
You had to do everything in the right sequence. And I had to talk to the same players, and I'd go in the locker room, and the first players I talked to, that was kind of something that you had in the back of your mind. All right, and one of the first players I always used to talk to was Freddie Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And Freddie didn't play on any special teams, but we just got in a habit of talking together before every game. And he enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it, and I used to tell him stories about some of the Freeman McNeil of the Jets and some of the top running backs I've been around, and he really enjoyed that. And he would ask me, how did they approach things and that kind of thing. And so I would always go in the locker room on game day and go seek out Fred Taylor, and we'd have a little chat.
That is very interesting. Coach Larry Pasquale joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. Special Teams Coach of the Year back in 1990 with the Chargers. Spent 39 years coaching in the NFL, CFL, college, and high school level. Coach, I think it could become a distraction maybe in the next week or so with Maurice Jones-Drew holding out for more money with training camp fast approaching. From your experiences, do holdouts work?
Yeah, a lot of times they do. But the problem is, in the old days, when you had 6 weeks of training camp, a player could hold out 2 weeks or 3 weeks, come in, and he'd have enough time to get in shape.
Mm-hmm.
With training camp 2 weeks now, it's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
It's not that Maurice will not know the plays, but he has to get into running shape and cutting shape and timing of how fast things happen. And it's hard to recreate that unless you're actually practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my biggest fear when guys hold out is, as a coach, is that I've got to take it slow with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've got to take it slow. Unfortunately, the schedule puts a real damper on that thinking. Nevertheless, if he gets hurt in training camp and misses the first 4 games of the season, then you are really putting yourself behind the 8 ball. So I would always, if somebody holds out, I would go very careful with them and get those other guys ready that will play in front of them in case they need breaks and things like that.
Coach,
I think the Jaguars need Maurice bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You just look at the percentages and numbers. Their offense really needs him. We saw with the training camp schedule, schedule coming out. A lot of the stuff is not going to be like the evenings with Jack Del Rio and the way he had it. It's going to be earlier in the day. Do most coaches prefer a set time like mornings or afternoons or evenings?
Yeah, they're all different. Some teams do prefer it, but my point to the coaches is that the advantage that the Jaguars have is that particularly early in the season, it's very humid in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. And that is an advantage if your team learns to practice in that kind of weather. If you give Tom Coughlin any credit at all, and there's plenty of credit to give him, is that he made us practice and coach in the most difficult time of the day, the 1:30 to 3 o'clock. We were out there. It wasn't a Paris Island, but it was the point where we had water and we did get drinks. But he made us understand the value of handling the heat.
Yeah.
And I think that when you move away from that as a Jaguar team, you lose some of the wonderful advantage you have, because there's no way that the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Washington Redskins or the New York Jets can recreate Jacksonville heat in the training camp.
That's a great point. Coach Larry Pasquale joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. Coach Larry, it's always a pleasure. You take care, and thank you again.
Thanks, all the best for you, and thanks for having me on.
All right. One of my favorites, it's Miller on Sports and 1600 The Beach. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Miller on Sports.
This is the Wall.